The corridor carried the low hum of a place that never really slept, a building that breathed through vents and fluorescent lights, that swallowed footsteps and returned them as echoes. Boots moved with purpose along the polished floor, some fast, some measured, each stride carrying rank even before the insignia came into view. Orders were spoken in short bursts, clipped and efficient, the way people talk when time is currency and hesitation costs too much. She stood just off to the side near a column, not in anyone's way, not demanding attention, waiting. Her posture was relaxed but alert, weight balanced evenly, shoulders loose. She wore a simple gray blazer over a dark shirt, clean lines, no excess. A tablet rested against her forearm, screen dark. Anyone really looking might have noticed how still she was, how her eyes tracked movement without following it, how she seemed to register everything without reacting to anything. But no one was really looking. People passed her as if she were part of the wall. A pair of junior soldiers jogged by, laughing about something she didn't hear. A technician cursed under his breath as he fumbled with the cart. The air smelled faintly of floor cleaner and burnt coffee, the kind brewed hours ago and reheated too many times. She checked the time on her watch. 5 minutes early. Right on schedule. Hey! The voice cracked through the ambient noise like a whip. Sharp. Accustomed to obedience. She turned toward it. A man in uniform stood several steps away, one hand resting on his belt, the other already gesturing impatiently. His sleeves were crisp, his boots immaculate, his expression bored in the way of someone who believed his authority should be self-evident. "What are you doing just standing there?" he asked. "I'm waiting," she replied evenly. He frowned, eyes flicking to the tablet then away again. "Waiting for what?" "For my escort," he snorted. "Right. Look, we're short today. Closet's down the hall. You can start with this section." Without waiting for a response, he reached behind him and grabbed a mop leaning against the wall, its handle worn smooth by years of use. He slid it across the floor toward her with the casual flick of his wrist. The mop bumped gently against her shoe and rolled to a stop. A ripple of quiet amusement moved through the nearby cluster of people. It wasn't loud laughter, just the kind that hid behind smirks and exchanged glances, the shared understanding of a moment that would never be written down. She looked down at the mop, then back up at him. "I don't think that's necessary," she said. The man straightened slightly, the smallest change in posture, like a switch being flipped. "Necessary isn't your call. This facility runs on order. Everyone does their part." She held his gaze. "And you're sure this is my part?" He stepped closer. Not aggressively, but with intent, invading the space just enough to assert dominance. "I'm sure enough. Unless you've suddenly got a badge you forgot to put on." "I didn't forget anything," she said. One of the soldiers nearby shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between them. Another leaned against the wall, arms crossed, enjoying the show. The man's lips thinned. "You don't get paid to argue." Something almost like amusement flickered in her eyes, gone as quickly as it appeared. She adjusted the tablet against her arm, fingers briefly tightening on its edge. "Then neither do you." The temperature in the corridor seemed to drop a degree. "What did you just say?" he asked. "I said," she replied calmly, "I'm not here to clean floors." He let out a short laugh, humorless. "Everyone's here to clean something. Now pick it up." She didn't move. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. People slowed as they passed, curiosity tugging them to look just a second longer. Confrontation had a gravity of its own. "You know," he continued, lowering his voice as if offering advice, "if you want to keep your job, you don't start your first day by being difficult." She tilted her head slightly. "First day?" His brows knit together. "Don't play games." "I'm not," she said. "I just want to be clear." "Clear about what?" He almost snapped, but something in her tone stopped him. It wasn't defiant. It wasn't pleading. It was measured, controlled, as if she were choosing each word for a reason he couldn't see yet. He glanced around, aware of the audience, unwilling to back down now. Authority, once challenged, demanded reinforcement. Pick it up. She sighed, a quiet sound, barely audible. Not frustration. Not fear. More like resignation, as if this outcome had been anticipated long before either of them stepped into the corridor. Fine, she said. She bent slightly, reaching for the mop handle. As she did, the sleeve of her blazer slid back just enough to expose a band of dark skin beneath. Ink. Not the flashy kind. No bright colors, no exaggerated curves. Just black, deep and matte, etched with deliberate precision. A shape coiled tight, muscles suggested by subtle lines, head angled forward in perpetual readiness. A viper. The handle paused inches from her hand. Someone nearby sucked in a breath. She straightened slowly, her arm still angled, the tattoo fully visible now. The snake seemed almost alive under the lights, its gaze fixed, its fangs bared in silent warning. The man's eyes locked onto it. For a fraction of a second, his expression didn't change. Then something shifted behind it, something small but unmistakable. Recognition. Or the ghost of it. That's... He stopped himself. Her eyes never left his face. That's what? He recovered quickly, scoffing. That's inappropriate. Cover it. Inappropriate? She echoed softly. Tattoos like that, he said, waving a hand as if to dismiss the image, don't belong in a place like this. Interesting, she said. Because I got it in a place much more dangerous. The murmurs grew louder now, no longer hidden. Whispers moved like static through the crowd. Is that what I think it is? No way. Those are classified. She's messing with him. The man's jaw tightened. I don't care where you got it. You're not special. She smiled then, just a little. Not warmth. Not kindness. Something sharper. Neither are you, she replied. The words landed heavier than shouting ever could. His face flushed. You think a tattoo makes you intimidating? I think, she said, bad assumptions are. She finally lifted the mop, holding it loosely, like it weighed nothing at all. For a moment, it looked absurd in her hands, an object that didn't belong, like a prop from the wrong story. He opened his mouth to speak again, to assert, to reclaim control. And the alarm screamed. It wasn't the standard drill tone everyone had learned to ignore. This was sharper, urgent, threaded with warning. Red lights flashed along the corridor, bathing the walls in sudden color. Gas breach! A voice shouted from somewhere down the hall. Maintenance bay! People froze for a heartbeat, then exploded into motion. Training kicked in. Shouts overlapped. Boots pounded. She dropped the mop. It clattered to the floor, forgotten, as she turned toward the sound, her entire demeanor shifting in an instant. The calm remained, but now it was focused, honed to a point. The man reached out reflexively. Hey, stay where you are! She was already moving. She moved toward the alarm as if pulled by a line only she could feel, steps quick but controlled, eyes already scanning angles, exits, the rhythm of panic around her. The corridor that had been a stage for humiliation seconds earlier dissolved into noise and urgency. People shouted over one another, boots skidded, carts rattled. Red lights strobed across faces that had lost their smirks. Maintenance bay! Someone yelled again. Clear the wing! The man lunged forward and grabbed her arm. His fingers closed just above her wrist, tight, possessive. I said stay put! She stopped instantly. Not because of his grip, but because she chose to. She turned her head slowly and looked down at his hand. Let go, she said. It wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. It was flat, final. For a moment he didn't. Authority doesn't like being challenged twice in quick succession. Around them, people rushed past, some glancing back, confused to see the confrontation still happening while alarms blared. I don't know who you think you are, he said through clenched teeth. But you don't move without clearance. Her gaze lifted to meet his. The red lights carved shadows into her features, sharpening them. You're holding up evacuation, she replied. That's clearance enough. he scoffed, but his grip loosened just a fraction. Enough. She twisted her arm in a smooth, economical motion, not yanking, not forcing, just rotating in a way that used his own grip against him. His fingers slipped free as if he never meant to hold on at all. A couple of nearby soldiers slowed, eyes widening. One of them mouthed, "Did you see that?" "Don't touch me again," she said, already turning away. "That's an order," he shouted after her, voice cracking over the siren. She didn't break stride. The maintenance bay doors loomed ahead, half open, vapor spilling out in pale curls that caught the red light and turned it pink. The smell hit her before the noise did, sharp, metallic, wrong. Gas, pressurized, angry. Two technicians stood frozen near a panel, arguing loudly. "Valve stuck. Shut the main. If we shut the main, pressure spikes." She cut between them. "Masks," she said, pointing. "Now." They stared at her, startled by the certainty in her tone. One hesitated. "Who are you?" "Someone who doesn't want this place on the evening news," she replied. They obeyed. She pulled a respirator off a hook, fitted it in one practiced motion, and crouched near the panel. Her fingers moved fast, precise, checking seals, tracing lines. She listened, head tilted slightly, as if the hiss spoke a language she understood. Behind her, the corridor filled with bodies kept at a distance by yellow tape and shouted commands. The man pushed through, furious, face flushed. "Get back!" he yelled. "You're not authorized!" She didn't look up. "If you pull me back," she said, voice muffled through the mask, "you'll have a much bigger problem." A few heads turned toward him now. The crowd's attention was shifting, curiosity replacing mockery. The dynamic he'd controlled minutes ago was slipping, and he felt it. "Sir," a junior officer said quietly, "she might be right." He rounded on him. "Stay in your lane." The hiss intensified for a second, then softened as she adjusted a secondary valve, easing pressure instead of fighting it. The vapor thinned. She stood, removed the mask, and exhaled slowly. "There," she said. "Temporary. You'll need to replace the coupling." Silence followed, broken only by the distant echo of alarms winding down. Someone started clapping. It died quickly, embarrassed, but the sound had already landed. The man stared at her, stunned. "You can't just… Who taught you that?" She wiped her hands on a cloth. "Someone patient. That was classified equipment," he snapped, grasping for ground. "You had no business. You left it unsecured," she cut in. "And your people froze." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. No one laughed now. He looked around, aware that eyes were on him differently. Measuring. Questioning. He straightened, voice rising. "This conversation isn't over. You will explain yourself?" She turned to face him fully, the bay lights bright now, unflattering in their honesty. As she folded her arms, the blazer sleeves slid back again. The Viper returned to view. This time, the reaction was immediate. A sharp intake of breath from someone behind him. A whispered, "Holy!" His gaze snapped to her arm and locked there. Color drained from his face so fast it was almost comical. "No," he said quietly. She waited. "That's not…" He shook his head, a nervous laugh escaping. "That's not real." "Looks real," someone muttered. He raised his voice, trying to drown the whispers. "Anyone can get ink. It doesn't mean anything." Her eyes narrowed just a touch. "You're sure?" "Yes," he said too quickly. "Because if it did mean something, you wouldn't be standing here arguing with me. You'd be…" "Dead?" she offered. The word landed heavy. A senior technician stepped forward, eyes fixed on the tattoo. "Sir," he said, hesitant, "I've seen that marking before." The man snapped toward him. "No, you haven't." "I have," the technician insisted. "Briefing years ago. They said if you saw it, you were already behind." The man's mouth opened, then closed. She let the silence stretch, letting the weight settle on every shoulder in the room. The humiliation was no longer hers. It had changed hands. "You're embarrassing yourself," he said finally, desperation edging his tone. "This is some kind of stunt." She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "You handed me a mop," she said. "In front of your people. That was the stunt." He swallowed. Around them, phones stayed in pockets, but memories were being recorded all the same. The crowd sensed something turning, something irreversible. Footsteps approached from down the corridor, measured, authoritative. A presence that didn't need to announce itself. The man straightened, relief and dread colliding in his chest. Back up. Control restored. She heard it too and stepped back, folding her sleeve down, hiding the viper once more. Not because she needed to, but because she chose when it was seen. The approaching figure stopped just short of the bay. The man took a breath, ready to explain, to reframe, to reclaim the story, and realized he no longer owned it. The footsteps grew louder, steady and unhurried, cutting through the lingering tension like a blade through cloth. Conversations died as if someone had turned a dial. Even the machinery seemed to quiet, the building holding its breath. People straightened instinctively, shoulders squaring, hands falling to their sides. Authority had entered the space, the kind that didn't need to shout to be felt. She stood still near the maintenance bay, posture relaxed but ready, eyes forward. The mop lay abandoned several yards behind her, forgotten, a symbol no one dared acknowledge anymore. The man who had shoved it at her moments earlier wiped his palms against his uniform, the red flush on his face fading into something paler, tighter. The approaching figure stopped just inside the bay, surveying the scene with a single slow glance. Vapor residue clung faintly to the air. Tools were scattered where technicians had dropped them. A half-dozen people avoided eye contact, suddenly very interested in the floor. "What happened here?" the voice asked. The man stepped forward immediately, too quickly. "Sir, there was a breach. We handled it." The gaze shifted to him. "Handled it how?" He opened his mouth, then hesitated. His eyes flicked to her, then away. "Maintenance error. Contained." She didn't speak. The pause stretched. "I see," the voice said, unconvinced. "And who stabilized the secondary valve?" The man swallowed. "She assisted." "Assisted," the voice repeated. "Is that the term you're using?" A beat. Then, quietly, "Yes, sir." The gaze turned to her now. Appraising. Not dismissive. Not impressed. Just precise, like a scale measuring weight. "You," the voice said. "Step forward." She did. As she moved, the sleeve of her blazer rode up again, just enough. The viper surfaced in the harsh bay light, its black lines sharp and unmistakable. A ripple went through the onlookers, sharper this time, edged with something close to awe. The air changed. The figure's eyes dropped to the tattoo. Froze. Just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Everyone saw it. The man saw it too, and whatever hope he'd been clinging to collapsed. "That's not possible," someone whispered. She stopped an arm's length away. Met the gaze evenly. "You're supposed to be retired," the voice said slowly. "I am," she replied. "Most days." Silence followed, thick and heavy, pressing down on the room. The word retired didn't land the way it usually did. It didn't suggest rest or distance. It suggested survival. The voice cleared its throat. "You weren't scheduled until this afternoon." "I arrived early," she said. "Habit." A few people nodded without realizing it, as if that explanation made perfect sense. The figure turned slightly, eyes sweeping the room. "Everyone else, clear the bay." "Now." No one argued. Boots moved fast. Tools were gathered. Conversations dissolved into hurried whispers as the crowd dispersed, eager to put distance between themselves and whatever they just stumbled into. The man lingered, unsure. "You too," the voice said. "Sir, I should." "Now." He hesitated only a second before snapping to attention and retreating, jaw clenched, pride dragging behind him like a torn flag. When the bay was mostly empty, the voice returned to her. You didn't have to intervene. She shrugged lightly. You didn't have to let it escalate. A pause. Then a low exhale. Fair. The figure studied her again, this time longer. You're consulting on containment protocol. Yes. And you were mistaken for janitorial staff. She tilted her head. That's one way to put it. Another pause, this one tinged with something like regret. I'll address that. I'm sure you will, she said. The figure nodded once, then stepped aside, gesturing down the corridor. Walk with me. They moved together, footsteps echoing softly now that the alarms had fully died. The hallway looked different than it had earlier, less hostile, stripped of its audience. The lights seemed dimmer without the red flashing, shadows softer. You still wear the mark, the voice said after a moment. She glanced at her arm. It's part of me. Most don't, the voice replied. They want distance. I don't believe in pretending, she said. Especially not after everything it cost to earn. The figure stopped near a window overlooking the training yard. Recruits ran drills below, their movements synchronized, unaware of the quiet reckoning happening above them. He shouldn't have done that, the voice said. What he did? No, she agreed. He shouldn't have. But he did, the voice continued. And now he'll have to answer for it. She leaned against the railing, crossing her arms. This isn't about punishment. No, it's about correction, she said. If you make an example of him, he'll resent it. If you educate him, he'll remember it. The voice considered that. You've always been strategic. She smiled faintly. I had good teachers. They stood in silence for a few seconds, watching the drills below. Sweat glinted in the sunlight. Commands echoed faintly upward. You saved lives back there, the voice said. I prevented damage, she corrected. Lives were never really in danger. That's not what the report will say. She shrugged again. Reports say whatever they need to. The voice turned toward her. You could have revealed yourself earlier. Avoided all of this. She met the gaze steadily. I wanted to see how far it would go. And now we know. The words hung between them, sharp and undeniable. Footsteps echoed again from the far end of the corridor. Slower this time. Reluctant. The man approached, face stiff, eyes downcast. You wanted to see me, sir? He asked. The voice didn't answer immediately. Instead, it looked at her. Do you want to say it? The voice asked quietly. Or should I? She pushed off the railing and stepped forward, stopping just in front of him. He didn't look up. You made an assumption, she said. Several, actually. About who belongs where. About who deserves respect. About what authority looks like. His jaw tightened. You used humiliation as a shortcut, she continued. Because it's easier than leadership. He finally looked up then, eyes flashing with a mix of anger and shame. I was following procedure. No, she said calmly. You were following bias. The word struck harder than any shout. You didn't see a consultant, she went on. You didn't see experience. You saw a woman who didn't look like power to you. And you tried to remind her of her place. Silence. She leaned in slightly, just enough that he could see the viper clearly now. This, she said, tapping the ink lightly, was earned in places where mistakes don't get second chances. His breath hitched. You're lucky, she said softly. Today, the lesson costs you pride. Not lives. The voice stepped in then. There will be a formal review. He nodded stiffly. Yes, sir. And you will apologize. He swallowed. Yes, sir. The man turned toward her, hesitation flickering across his face. For a moment, it looked like he might resist, might justify, might lash out. Then his shoulders sagged. I was wrong, he said quietly. I shouldn't have treated you that way. She studied him for a long second. Then nodded once. No, she said. You shouldn't have. She stepped back, giving him space to breathe again. The weight lifted slightly, but not completely. Some lessons were meant to linger. As he walked away, diminished, the voice turned to her. You didn't have to be that direct. She smiled, this time with a hint of warmth. Yes, she said. I did. The voice watched her for. The corridor felt different now, quieter in a way that had nothing to do with noise. The building still hummed, still breathed through vents and wiring, but the tension that had wrapped itself around every surface earlier had begun to loosen. People moved with a new caution, glancing at one another, replaying moments in their heads, already editing how they would tell this story later. She walked steadily, tablet tucked under her arm again, steps unhurried. The sun spilling through the high windows caught the dust in the air, turning it into something almost soft. It reminded her of places far from here, places where light meant exposure, not comfort. Behind her, the man stood rooted where she'd left him, staring at the floor like it might offer absolution if he looked hard enough. Pride had abandoned him completely now. All that remained was the raw awareness of being seen clearly for the first time. Wait! The word followed her down the hall, uncertain, stripped of command. She stopped, but she didn't turn around immediately. When she did, her expression was unreadable. I need to say this, he said, stepping closer but keeping a respectful distance now. Not because I was ordered to. She said nothing. I thought authority meant control, he continued. That if I kept people in their place, everything would function. Her gaze didn't soften. Control is fragile, she said. It breaks under pressure. He nodded slowly, as if tasting the truth of it. I didn't see you, he admitted. I saw a role I'd already decided for you. That's the problem, she replied. You decided. A long silence stretched between them, not hostile this time, just heavy. Finally, he straightened, shoulders squaring in a way that felt less performative, more sincere. I won't make that mistake again, he said. She studied him for a moment, weighing the words. Then she nodded once. Good. She turned and continued down the corridor, leaving him there with the echo of his own promise. The conference room waited at the end of the hall, glass walls revealing a table already surrounded by people who looked up as she entered. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to unease. These were planners, analysts, people who dealt in hypotheticals and risk assessments, not confrontations that left bruises on the ego. She took her seat without ceremony, set the tablet down, and tapped the screen awake. Let's begin, she said. The room followed her lead instinctively. As she spoke, she laid out vulnerabilities, traced fault lines through systems everyone else thought were secure. Her voice was steady, precise, the cadence of someone who had learned long ago that clarity saves lives. She didn't raise her sleeve. She didn't need to. The room already understood exactly who they were listening to. Outside the glass, the man passed by once, slower than before. He glanced in, saw her at the head of the table, and kept walking. Hours later, the meeting adjourned. Papers were gathered. Chairs scraped softly against the floor. People thanked her with a respect that felt earned, not forced. She stepped outside into the late afternoon sun. The heat pressed against her skin, grounding, real. The viper slept beneath the fabric of her sleeve, unseen but present, as it always was. The voice from earlier joined her near the entrance, hands clasped behind their back. You didn't have to stay for the review, it said. She smiled faintly. I wanted to make sure the lesson stuck. It will, the voice replied. He's already requested additional leadership training. She nodded. Good. A pause followed, comfortable this time. You know, the voice added. Some people would have used today to demand consequences. To make an example. She looked out across the yard, where recruits were finishing drills, their laughter carrying faintly on the breeze. Fear teaches people how to hide, she said. Understanding teaches them how to change. The voice regarded her for a long moment. You still believe that after everything? Yes, she said without hesitation. Especially after everything. She adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder, ready to leave. Will we see you again? The voice asked. Probably, she replied. Places like this have a way of needing reminders. She started down the steps, sunlight warm on her face, and didn't look back. Inside, the man stood alone in the corridor where it had all begun. The mop was gone now, put away by someone who hadn't wanted to touch it in front of others. The floor gleamed, spotless. He replayed the moment in his head, the casual flick of his wrist, the laughter he'd allowed, the confidence that had felt so natural then. It all seemed distant now, like a story about someone else. He flexed his hand unconsciously, remembering how easily she'd slipped from his grip. How little force she needed. When he finally moved, it was with purpose. Not the brittle kind that demanded obedience, but the quieter kind that asked questions first. Outside, she reached her car and paused, resting a hand on the roof, breathing in the city air. For a brief moment, she rolled her sleeve up and looked at the Viper. It hadn't changed. It never did. People thought ink like that was about intimidation. About warning the world. For her, it was memory. She rolled the sleeve back down, got in, and drove away. Somewhere behind her, a lesson lingered in a polished corridor, etched deeper than any tattoo could ever be.